Hey, Jissan.
Hey, Gyongy.
Hi, good to meet you again for our coffee chat. So we had a bit of chat before we hit the recording button. What should we talk about today? And we acknowledge that, we are at the beginning of a new year. Often, this is the time when we are looking into, setting our objectives or working out the plan behind our objectives, and also thinking about our development plan and maybe career moves that we are hoping to make. And sometimes things go according to plan, but sometimes not. And sometimes it's because of reasons outside of our influence. Sometimes it's within our influence. So, what I thought we could do today is to kind of share our stories about when we made some potentially risky moves in our career, which we were fearful of making, but we did it anyway. And it kind of brought something unexpected benefit to our career. Would you like to kick it off? Could you tell me a
Yeah,
story?
absolutely, absolutely. And it's always funny because the beginning of the year is a great time to reflect. And I think most people, as they get to the end of the year, they're rushing through deliverables, getting projects done that they almost forget about their career. And it's usually after the holiday break, being able to come back and reflect that you start to think about these things. So, I think for the, Own It or Quit It podcast, I think this is a pivotal question. When you're in these kind of circumstances and you're really considering whether or not the role that you're in is right for you, how do you make those decisions? There were two times that this happened for me. So the first one was when I was first in marketing. I had an opportunity to move from the US to another market. So I went to Vietnam. And what was interesting at the time was, I would love to work in a different market, but there were a lot of people that were asking questions around, is this the right move for you? And the reason why they were asking that is the size of the business. So, especially in the US, I think when we think about career development, we think about progression, and it's always a positive progression in the sense of it's a bigger business, it's a bigger team, it's a better title. But a lot of times, I think we forget about acquiring skills. And in my specific example, I was in the US, I was working on a very large business, multi-million dollar business, and I was moving to Vietnam where the size of the business was a fraction of the US. So if someone were to look at on paper, they would say, well, this next move is a much smaller business. It means you might have less responsibility, but it was actually the exact opposite. By moving to Vietnam, I found out that because there were less resources as compared to the US, each individual was doing more in their job function, and there were less people to do the work for you. So, what I found
Mm.
out in Vietnam was that I was stretched. I was pushed in terms of developing skills, not only in marketing, because it was a marketing role, but I was being challenged on my finance, my supply chain understanding, my ability to understand how to build teams. And then, of course, all the cultural, maturity, cultural awareness aspects of working in a different market. So at the end of the day, I actually did more in this smaller business than I would have ever gotten if I just stayed in the US and I went to a progressively larger responsibility or role. But, I will tell you at the time, it's very difficult when you hear your colleagues asking you those tough questions about, are you sure? Is this right for you? Do you really want to go to a smaller market? What if someone thinks this? And I started asking myself this whole thing about perception versus reality. I think a lot of
Mm.
times we're afraid of doing something that may feel right, from a gut perspective. This is what I should do, but you're fearful of the perception. What will someone see when they see on LinkedIn that I'm moving to a smaller business? What will they assume? And I think for me, it was you have to put that aside. And you have to assume that the reality of your experience is going to be better than the perception that's going to be out there. And then you have to bet on yourself that you're going to acquire some skills. So, that Vietnam example was a great one. I think the second time this happened in my career was actually when we were together. So, when we were together in Central and Eastern Europe, I was part of a leadership team. I was leading a marketing organization. I was very proud of myself. It was a large team. My next immediate role was actually going back to the US, and it was in a sales manager role, which again, you go from leading a very large cross-functional team, you have, a couple $100 million worth of responsibility, and now you're a single individual sales manager. But I knew that sales was an important skill set to acquire if I wanted to become a bigger leader in the US. So, yes, it is quote unquote a step back because from a title perspective, I go from marketing director to sales manager. But I knew if I think about it in the long run, and I think this is really important, you have to think about your career in multiple years out. And then all of a sudden, it becomes incredibly clear that having a sales experience or having those additional skills will open the door up to many more possibilities in the future, as opposed to this narrow view that it has to be a marketing director role or it has to be a progressively senior title that I'm chasing. So, two quick examples, but I think a lot of people that are watching us today might be in that position where they feel like they can make a move, but they're worried what other people will think. And I think I would tell people, don't worry about what other people think. Let them think about it when you're in a more senior leader role in a few years because of this move that you made. But
I
yeah,
Yeah, fantastic. I absolutely love it. And can you tell me if the second risky move was easier to make just because you've already had experience stepping out of your normal
you know,
path, or
I,
was it
I,
different?
yeah, I would say human nature means that it's always going to feel scary. And I think every
Mm,
time you do it, you might have a better idea of what you need to do to be successful. So I do think that when I did it the second time, I was clear on what the role of my manager would need to be for me to be successful. I was clear on what type of resources, what type of steps I would need to take in the
hmm
first couple of weeks to be successful. But the perception versus reality thing, it's human nature to be worried about what other
mm,
people think, right? And I think
mm,
I had left the US to go to Vietnam and then to Central and Eastern Europe. And then I was coming back to the US. And sure, people saw me leave as an early, career marketer. And now here I come back going into a sales manager role. So was it even worth leaving in the first place? Look at how he's, kind of starting off in sales again. And all of those doubts did creep in. But what I
mm,
realized was that having the right stakeholders, having a good network in place to kind of support me, I wasn't left on an island, right? So there's a lot of things you can put around you to be successful. So, I think it was easier, but at the same time, it didn't take away the fear, if that makes sense.
yeah,
I think I just had
yeah.
a better idea of how to manage the fear.
Yeah, oh, get it totally. So, could you tell to our listeners what would be the kind of formula you would advise using when they're taking a
Yeah.
smart risk, let's say?
Yeah, I think you have to take a current inventory of yourself in terms of what are the skills that you currently have and how many of those skills are transferable. Because a lot of times, let's say, for example, you are a technical programmer and you're doing coding and development. That is a very specific skill. And I wouldn't say you can easily take those skills and just go into marketing or finance or something like that. So I think you have to be honest with yourselves around what skills have you obtained today and how many of those are transferable. I think once you make that decision, then it's about who is your network. So do you have, and I call this, I reference this a lot, a personal board of directors. So
Mm,
individuals that you trust, individuals that may be within the organization or outside the organization that would help you think through, okay, what are you going to do after this next move? So I think the network alongside having a clear inventory of your transferable skills are probably the biggest one. And then I think it's around self-awareness.
mm,
Are you really able to handle the fear, the doubt, the self-confidence to be able to do something that you've never done before? And that
mm,
takes personal development, that takes coaching, but having that self-awareness, I think, is really important. But if you have those three things, I think you can probably do any role, and you could be successful in it because you have a humility to it. You will be honest with yourself about what it takes to be successful, but then you also have clarity on what skills you bring to the table, right? So when you talk to
yeah,
some new people that you're working with, they can immediately see how you're going to provide value. And it's because of the self-awareness exercises.
fantastic. And
Yeah.
if you could give me one thing, one key impact on your life that any of those risky moves gave you?
Yeah.
If you have to choose the biggest impact, what would that be?
Oh, I'm gonna cheat and give you two, if you don't
Okay.
mind, right? So I think the first one is just diversity in culture and understanding how to work with different groups of people. I think if I would have stayed in just the US, yes, the US is a melting pot. It has lots of diversity, lots of different experiences, but there's nothing like going to Vietnam or Central and Eastern Europe and being challenged to say, okay, I'm coming from America, but I'm also an Indian immigrant, right? In the sense that my parents came to this country. I have a lot of, difference in terms of, cultural understanding and awareness. So you have to take, a lot of the norms and understand how to work with different people.
Mhm,
You need to know what introverts versus extroverts, how
mhm,
different markets operate, how people think and how people brainstorm in conference rooms. It's all very different. So that was amazing because when I came back, I was able to better understand my teams. I was able to build diverse teams because I kind of understood where they're coming from to a degree. I think the second one is when you go to smaller markets, you are forced to do more with less. So in the US, you have lots of data, you have lots of resources, you have lots of partners that you can work with to deliver marketing and develop strategies. In these smaller markets, a lot more is put on you, which really tests your ability to understand data, your ability to understand strategy. So I think I was able to achieve more in a shorter period of time by taking some of those risky roles. So those are the two things for me. But enough about
Fabulous.
me, Janji. Let's talk about you, right? So, tell me about a time when you were in a situation like this, when you had to take a role that, you were fearful of, but felt like it was the right move for you.
Yeah, yeah. So my story goes back to probably the middle of my career with in my corporate times when I was leading the HR function for a hub of our business. And HR transformation reached us, and it was clear that we're going to cut roles within HR. And it was also clear that in the country there were three senior HR professionals, and we're going to land with one. And it also looked very likely that because the business I was looking after was smaller than the other one, that my role is going to go. And I was part of the team who designed the new model. So it's not just, my role was impacted. I had to be part of the conversation, and there was nowhere else to hide because when I looked at the numbers, I had to agree that we are too heavy on the top, so that was a difficult time. And I've been for several years in that role at that time, and I just did not see where else I could go. Um the organization did not have any similar size roles, and it looked like that's the end of my career with the
Mm.
company. And I was pretty miserable, I have to say. And I just thought, what do I do now? Do I just sit it through and wait what will happen? Or do I shake things up a little bit? And that was combined with my 40th birthday, which all my friends told me, you're gonna see, turning 40 changes everything. The world is going to look different. And, I don't know, I just got such gloom and doom around it. And there was something inside waking up that, no, that's not gonna happen to me. I actually going to start a phenomenal new chapter, and I'm going to enjoy my times coming after 40. And I looked around and I found an opportunity to take a sabbatical, and I applied for a corporate social responsibility program actually within the company.
Mm.
And I got through, and I left for 3 months to Azerbaijan working for Save the Children
Wow.
as an HR consultant. And I never worked in any other industry before than the pharmaceutical. I knew that I'm going to land in an organization that is totally different than what I've ever, worked with before. I'm gonna be parachuted there as an alien, and I will need to very quickly gain rapport with the team and make an impact. And I never been to Azerbaijan before, and I got some help from the company. I could take my laptop, and I was given a phone, and I was given a pile of cash to find an apartment for myself, but that was probably it. And there was no clarity what role I'm going to come back
Mm.
to. So that was the other thing, it was so counterintuitive to go and do this wild move instead of looking for my next job. That would have been the most logical next step. But somehow inside, I felt like this is not just a threat that my role is going away, it is also an opportunity
Mm.
to really stretch myself and see what I'm made of and what I'm capable of and expand my thinking. So, cutting the long story short, I landed in Azerbaijan and I had a phenomenal 3 months. I met some incredible people, and it wasn't always easy. I felt like an alien for a while, and I really had to earn trust there. But what I've learned actually being there is that human connection and the ability to gain trust of people is absolutely essential in any culture, in any business, and also that sometimes courage is the thing that takes you to your next place.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had a fabulous time. And I came back. And actually, by the time I came back, it was clear my job is going away. So I was ready to pack my bag and look for another job when somebody from the other business unit tapped on my shoulder and offered me a job to head the HR function in the Czech Republic. So why? Because she learned about me through the stories of that corporate social responsibility program. So
Interesting.
suddenly I went on the map of the international talent, HR
Yeah.
talent world. So everything started from there. My international career started on that very day. And I kind of from there, I went to other jobs and I spent 15 years traveling the world and working in various countries.
You know what's so funny about the story? You led off with turning 40, and I will tell you, when you turn 30, when you turn 40, when you turn 50, I think they're always the same tone. It's, oh, this is the end because you've entered into this next decade. And I think your perspective of, no, I'm starting a new chapter, and new starting means, taking new chances, new adventures,
Yeah.
new opportunities, and having that positivity about it is incredible. I guess when you were thinking about making this move, did you ever feel like, well, what happens if this doesn't work? What happens if Azerbaijan is a terrible decision? I'm sure there was self-doubt that popped in every now and then. How did you deal with that inner voice? Because I think a lot of times we allow that inner voice to be louder maybe than it should, and it prevents us from taking that leap. So did you have that
Yeah.
inner voice?
I absolutely had that inner voice, and my family had that
Mm.
outer voice as well. So not just inner. So I got a lot of, I got into a lot of deep conversations about
Sure.
why am I doing this, and what's in it for me, and what's gonna happen if it doesn't work out.
Mhm.
So it was absolutely in the cards that I'm going to have a rough time. That I'm going to feel lonely, that I'm not going to be able to make an impact. Um, but I trusted my gut, and my gut was telling me is that to get unstuck, you have to move forward, and sometimes take this leap is what
Mm.
what is required to find yourself in a field of new opportunities. And that's exactly what happened. I would have probably not got that job, that next job that opened my door for international career if I don't make that first move and don't
Mm.
prove that I'm compatible.
Yeah.
I have transferable skills, and I gained a lot of confidence through that experience.
Yeah, and I think it just brings back the whole idea of whenever someone's in a situation like this, there is a risk versus reward consideration, right? Here's
Exactly.
all the benefits that you can get from this. Yes, there are some potential flaws or downside, but I think being aware of what those are and then being proactively prepared. If that were to happen, here's what I would do. And I think a lot of times having some plan of action just in case something negative were to happen, having thought through that ahead of time helps you take the bolder action because now the unknown, the variables that you're worried about, at least you're somewhat planning for it, right? Because
Yeah.
in your mind, you're thinking, okay, if it doesn't go well, here's what I can still learn from this, and here's what I'm going to do if it doesn't go that way. So hopefully, it never turns negative, and it never has any of that fear that we believe, because we probably build it up to be much more scarier than it actually is. You know?
Yeah. And I think you also realize that once you went through this, the second time, you have at least some sort of blueprint, how you
Hmm.
handle tricky situations, how you pull yourself out of potential danger, how you solve issues. And what it does, putting yourself through sometimes risky situations is it kind of helps you to stretch and improve your flexibility. And that is really important to kind of be able to shift and change and keep reinventing yourself, which is so important these days where we know that we don't know what the future of work is going to look like in not in 10 but 5 years time.
Yeah.
I think just itself the ability to change and put your feet on new ground and test yourself and be ready to fail and stand up and do it again. That is pure survival skill. And that is absolutely essential to be successful.
Yeah. So many of the people that I've coached along the way, we've always had this, okay, here's what potentially could go wrong, but here's so many benefits and opportunities. And I think pushing yourselves into that mentality of, I'm going to have this be successful. Because a lot of times I think you need to start by assuming you're going to be successful, assume it's going to be positive, assume you're going to have wins. And then all of a sudden it starts to come to reality, right? It's,
Yeah,
perception is reality sometimes in the sense that if you believe it, you can make it happen. So I always tell, the individuals that I'm coaching as well is you got to believe in yourself. Because I think
yeah.
what came through in your story is that you had a self-confidence about this whole thing that you will do this and it will be positive. And even if it doesn't work out afterwards, you're going to get some amazing skills and experiences from this that's going to help you grow personally and professionally, right? And
Absolutely,
that's
and
huge.
and not just skills, and not just the benefits of my career, but also I was very aware that I'm gaining life experience.
Exactly.
So, which is ultimately it's a big thing, isn't it? And I'm very aware that both of us brought examples which was connected to moving out of
Yeah.
the country, and
Yeah.
it's not always possible for everybody.
Hmm.
But I believe these learnings apply for those as well who make different sort of risk, take different sort of risk in their career, not necessarily related to a physical move, but a change that they would have not see coming and
Yeah.
feeling the fear and still doing it.
So, in the sense of our audience here that's watching us and hearing from this, so, it's the beginning of the year. The whole podcast is focused on own it or quit it. So, what would you give advice to someone who's watching us today? They're in a situation where they're fine with their roles. It's not energizing, and they're not incredibly excited about it, but it pays the bills. It's fine. What should they consider? What should they do? Any
Yeah.
advice?
So, I've in my throughout my corporate career, I had many talent and career conversations with people, and often about what's my next move, what's the next job I'm doing, um, and I learned that these kind of unexpected serendipities happen when you raise your eyes to a little bit further on the horizon, and you don't just think about your job destinations. You think about what kind of life you want to live, what kind of person you want to become, and you look at work and jobs as vehicles of taking you to those places physically, mentally, spiritually, and shape you to the into that person who you want to be. So my advice would be is to have a life vision, have some sort of compelling, passionate view on what you want to do with this opportunity on being in this world, and how you see work can help you to fulfill that. We spend most of our vacant hours at work. This is a huge decision what you spend those hours with, not just the impact on your life and what you make of your life, but also what kind of impact you make on people around you or on the world potentially. There is a phenomenal organization called 80,000 Hours. These
Hmm.
are folks who are studying what are the big topics in the world and how these can be addressed through, us taking the decision about what jobs we are making. So I would encourage everybody to go on 80,000hours.org. We're gonna put it in the comments of our session today. But yeah, so I would encourage everyone to look beyond the job and think about what kind of life they want to live.
I like that.
How about you?
Yeah, I think there's two things that I would say for people to take inventory of. I think the first one is what are the relationships that you have around yourself at work? So I think a lot of times people think about the job, the projects, the things that they're working on, but also what is the relationship with your manager? What is the relationship with the colleagues you have at work? Are you enjoying or dreading each meeting? Are you feeling that they're building you up or are they hyper competitive? Because, for some people, being in a competitive environment is actually the best thing because they like the idea of fighting and being able to take more and get more. And that's great if that's where your energy comes from. But not everyone thrives in those kind of situations. Some people are looking for a little bit more of the collegiate, everyone's working together. The competition's outside of the door. It's not inside the walls of this building. And I think a lot of times you have to take inventory of where you're getting your energy from. Because, there's been times where I've coached individuals and while they love their job and they love the work they do, they have a bad relationship with their manager. Maybe it's
Mhm.
micromanagement. And also they feel a bit of, I can't trust the people around me. So therefore, when you come to work, it feels like an isolated place, even though you're surrounded by people. You just don't have strong relationships. So
So
take
important.
inventory of that and even if you love the job that you have, if the relationships around you aren't strong enough, you can possibly get that same job in a place where you do have strong relationships, and that might be a catalyst to move. The other one that I always think about is, and it goes back to a little bit of what you were saying, is not only just the personal inventory, but to have a 5-year horizon on your career. Forget about what's happening in the next 6 months, the next 12 months, but where do you want to be in 5 years? And think about it from a personal and professional space. Do you want to have a family? Is your family going to be more mature? They're going to be older kids, for example. Maybe you have, no children and you and your partner are going to be traveling. Whatever those personal aspects are, what does the professional career need to look like to enable you to have happiness on the personal front? Because do you want to be trying to get promoted in 5 years and desperately trying to get to the next level? Or do you want to slowly move your career up there and be casually, promoted along the way so that you're in a comfortable place in 5 years? I don't know. But for every individual, it's going to be different. If you're early in your career, you probably have this sense of, I need to get promoted as soon as possible and I need to move to the next promotion as fast as I can. And that can be fine, but just make sure that you're getting the right skills along the way. It's not about chasing the title. It's about chasing those experiences very early on. And then later on, it's about, making some tough choices. Yes, you can get promoted, but maybe the best decision is to do a lateral move into another function to learn new skills because it's going to make you a better leader in a couple of years. So having that 5-year horizon, it takes a lot of the risk away from the next move and putting a lot of risk on, oh, what if the next move doesn't work? Well, think about the second move, the third move, the fourth move. And now all of a sudden the next move doesn't feel as risky because you have a vision of where it's going to take you. So, those would be the two things that I would tell our viewers.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, and I think where we both of us got to is that it's really essential to figure out what you actually want. And you can want anything you want. You may have a vision that you want to, your focus should be on your hobbies, on a rich personal life, on family, and you want a really good job that enables you to bring in the financials that,
Yeah.
keeps your family. That is perfectly valid reason. You don't always have to be, bringing everything, putting all that, getting everything from your work. That's also fine. But also, you may have a goal that you want to be a CEO of a company, and you have 15 years to make significant leaps in your career in order to get that job. And in that case, that's all, then you approach your career in a completely different way. And then you talk to with your family, you align your support network at home, and you kind of achieve that thing together. And there is no bad or good way of doing that as long as you're following your dream, not someone else's dream, not something that you believe you should be doing, but you don't feel that's the right thing for you. So I guess authenticity and clarity about what you really want is absolutely needed or important.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. This was a fun session. I enjoyed this, right? I think,
Yeah, me
for
too.
a lot of people, hopefully this motivates them to take action or at least, starts to plant the seed about, hey, there's some honest conversations you can have with yourself about your current situation. And, I think for a lot of us, it's about owning it, right? It's before you quit it, you got
Absolutely.
to try to own it first and you got to make the best of the situation you're in. So, yeah, I appreciate all of your thoughts.
Fantastic. Excellent. So listen, shall we give a little optional homework to our audience,
Yeah.
something they can ponder on until we come back with a new episode? Do you have something? Would you like
Yeah.
to give them a task?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and again, a lot of these things are going to be keep this to yourself and this is for your own self-awareness exercise. But, look around your current surrounding. Think about your manager, think about your manager's manager, your colleagues. Who are they? Are they people who are building you up? Or are they people that are taking energy from you? And I think have an inventory and make sure there's balance in your life. If you find out that almost all of the colleagues and everyone you're working with are not necessarily giving you as much energy as they're taking, that's something for you to really take down and note. And sometimes it's easy to sit down and just think about it over a cup of coffee. But if when you write it down and you put things on paper, you start to have much more clarity to how much energy is being wasted, right? Or being taken from you. So you deserve better. So you can always have that moment of, I'm going to do something about self-worth and self-care. And perhaps you don't change the role, but you actually introduce more exercise or you find other avenues to be able to get your energy back. But I think that's an important exercise I would recommend. And then the second one would be put down the next 5 years, start writing what you want to be when you grow up, right? So 5 years from
Brilliant.
now, I want to be a general manager. I want to be a vice president. I want to be someone who's leading a team. Maybe it's not about the title, it's about responsibilities you want to have in 5 years. And then start working backwards. Start thinking about what would it take to get there starting today. How about
All
yourself?
right. Well, I would bring in maybe a little bit more woo-woo task. And I would say, imagine you have all the courage of the world. You are absolutely fearless. What would be your big move then?
I like that. The woo woo. I like that. Everyone needs more woo in their life, right?
Yeah. Well, I
Fantastic.
think, after this session, I'm gonna sit down and journal about it a little bit as well. And, you inspired me with your question, and let's do it. Let's do
Yeah.
it for ourselves.
This is fantastic. So, thank you
Super.
for another wonderful, episode. And this is exciting that we get to do this. And, what I would say to any of our audience members, if there's any questions you have, throw it in the comments. Send us any, things or any topics you'd like us to explore further. We're going to be coming back to you with lots of different topics in the space of career management, but we're always ready to address a question that maybe our audience has or want to dig a little bit deeper into anything we've covered off today. So we're always open for that feedback.
Excellent. Yes, let's do that. And guys, let's commit that we're gonna own it or quit it, right? There is no other
Love
way.
it.
All
Excellent.
right.
Take care.
Take care. Bye then.